join the Health and Human Services Short Talk, the role of companion animals in recovering from trauma. For our Health and Human Services audience, having a general understanding that the people being served by our programs have experienced trauma is baseline. According to the Federal Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, or SAMHSA for short, trauma has no boundaries regarding age, gender, socioeconomic status, race, ethnicity, or sexual orientation. Trauma is a common experience for adults and children in American communities. Although many people who experience a traumatic event will go on with their lives without lasting negative effects, others will have difficulties and experience traumatic stress reactions. How someone responds to a traumatic experience is personal. If there is a strong support system in place, little or no prior traumatic experiences, and if the individual has many resilient qualities, it may not affect their mental health. That's a direct quote from SAMHSA. Although SAMHSA states that how someone responds to a traumatic experience is personal, we also know that there are systemic inequities and racial disparities that cause trauma and reduce the resiliency to traumatic events in certain communities more than others. And it is these communities that are overrepresented in our programs. Being trauma-informed and providing trauma-informed care is a clinical issue, but it's also an equity issue. And those things are not mutually exclusive. So when we look at the things that heal trauma or the practices we have in place in order to avoid re-traumatizing the people we work with, we also need to bring that lens with us. Yes, this is about this individual person and their recovery, but it's also about creating systems that are healing and just as well. There is a growing body of literature out there documenting the healing power of animals. The emerging research is really powerful and is shedding light on new dimensions of our bond with animals. So to talk about the role not just animals play, but the role that our companion animals play, let me rephrase that. So to talk about the role that not just any animals play, but the role of our companion animals in recovering from trauma, we have an expert with us today. Our speaker is Dr. Bree Conklin. Dr. Bree owns and operates an independent private practice that specializes in the treatment of complex trauma and traumatic grief and loss. Her practice is now embedded in the Magnolia Harbor Carefarm and allows for the therapeutic process to be facilitated by the healing green space of nature and human-animal connection. Dr. Bree is a licensed clinical social worker, certified compassionate bereavement care provider, certified eye movement desensitization reprocessing provider, and has specialized training in the neurosequential model of therapeutics, trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy, circle of security, child-parent psychotherapy, and play therapy. She earned her doctorate in social work from the University of Tennessee and her master's degree in social work from the University of West Florida. Dr. Bree, it is a pleasure to have you with us today. I am so excited to hear from you. I will now pass things over to you.
Thank you, Christine. And I was laughing as I was hearing the rambling of all the things, because I'm like, it's a really collective training experience to say there's a lot of ways to show up with human beings, and no one way is the single best way that I pull from a lot of different modalities. So thank you for such a kind introduction, Christine. I'm going to start sharing my screen. And just as a fun disclaimer, any picture of animals that are in my presentation are those that are within my own bubble in my own care farm. So this is actually my husband and one of our rescue dogs, Wolfie. And we'll get started in talking about the role of companion animals in recovering from trauma. So just a quick overview, I'm going to give you a brief introduction, very brief because Christine already introduced me. Our objectives for today is to take a look at what happens in the human body in response to trauma, what role do companion animals have in healing from trauma, and some of the systemic considerations for the co-sheltering of humans and their companion animals. And then I am hopeful that we have some time for question and answers. This is a topic that is near and dear to my heart that I shared with Christine. I could talk for hours on. So my specialized training, again, it's really specialized and focused in the areas of trauma, and even more specifically in traumatic grief. I own and operate Magnolia Harbor Carefarm. We are the second care farm in the United States that is focused very specifically on how do we show up with treating traumatic grief and loss. But we have a dual focus because not only are we a therapeutic program for traumatic grief and loss and complex trauma, but we are also a sanctuary that is home currently to 41 rescue animals, from dogs and horses to goats to pigs to a 34-year-old mini horse, and donkeys, and 2 baby sheep. They were orphaned little baby sheep. They are so delightful and precious. But I also teach in the College of Social Work at the University of Tennessee, and am a clinical supervisor and participant, or team member, of the veterinary social work team at the University of Tennessee. And then I also teach at my home university, back home in Pensacola, Florida, at West Florida University, also in their MSW program. This is a little of my world. Just wanted to share a bit of who I am. These are just a few of our animals. And then right front and center is my husband, Lyle. What I do would not be possible without his love and support. So all of these buddies here are some of the animals that are some of the 41 animals. A few more. I'm proudly obsessed with them. They are just the delights and loves of my heart. It's really quite incredible to be able to see their little personalities blossom when their nervous systems feel safe within our sanctuary. So, but it didn't start like 2 seconds ago. This is tiny baby Dr. Bree, very much friends with my animals, and what adult me knows now is that I am grateful to my parents very much for the gift of the animals that shared our home and were part of our family, not just because that's sparked part of the love of my animals, but also to my animal friends for being regulators when there was adversity and trauma going on in my own life. So as we move through this material, emotions might come up. I do share some stories of clients that, because of the nature of my work, can sometimes be filled with a bit of trauma. So just pay attention to, I'm so sorry, guys. Just pay attention to yourself. When you notice feelings or you start to daydream, if you feel your attention start to wander, just get curious, write it down so you can come back to it later, and just know that it's okay to step out or pause if you start to feel a bit too intensely about the feelings that are coming up. So quick thinking time, please use the chat, and for the sake of time, please do so quickly. What are the phrases and words or questions that you think of and or hear most often when you hear someone has experienced trauma? It's also okay to come off mute. Ella, go ahead.
Re-traumatization.
Re-traumatization. Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
Bree, I'm not sure if you're able to see what's in the Whova chat, so I'm just going to read out.
Yep, no, I can't. Thank you, Christine.
Yes, I'll just read out what is here and popping up for people. So some of the words are pain, depression, healing isn't linear, vulnerable, isolation and overwhelming, disconnection, trauma-informed care, PTSD, fear, abuse. How should I connect to engage with this person? How has it affected them? I can't move.
Thank you so much for reading those. And also, my heart is so proud because those are beautiful responses. I saw 2 participants, Donna and Jillian, and then I'll move us forward. So Donna, if you'll come off mute.
I can't lose my pets.
You can't lose your pets.
Yeah. The trauma already, well, I take care of a domestic violence shelter, but the trauma already experienced, and then, oh my gosh, the pet to be part of their life. It's a re-trauma. Yeah, being.
And it will actually keep people keep people from coming into shelter because they're so concerned about their pets and don't want to lose what is very likely one of the safest and possibly the only safe connection in their life.
Yeah, we allow pets, but it's getting housing, and we have limited transitional, which
Yeah.
is something that really helps to be able to see how the pet is and give that recommendation to
Yeah.
wherever they're moving. But that's the challenge, is being able to get housing even when you have the perfect behavior.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing, Donna and Jillian, and then I will move us forward.
Well, being a person that was already diagnosed CPTSD before I moved into the shelter, my constant thing was fear and hopelessness.
Thank you so much for sharing that, and sharing that is part of your lived experience and story as a human. So typically when we are talking to folks that have not been immersed in the trauma literature or just learning about it, some of the words and phrases that folks come up is they think, oh, is my thing not moving us forward? Okay, there we go. That some of the typical conceptions of trauma are that it's associated with a natural disaster or abuse or some egregious neglect and war. And don't realize that while trauma can occur in tandem with such events, that it's really an inner injury. It's a lasting rupture or split within the self due to those difficult or hurtful events. So there's 3 E's that when we think about trauma and conceptualizing it, there's the actual event that happened. There's the experience and the ways in which that event was experienced. But the piece that we really pay attention to is the effects of it. It's the symptoms after the event and the experience, because we can have someone who has, or we can have a group of people that have experienced the same event, but the way in which that lands and the impact that has on their nervous system can be very different. And I just want to check in really quickly. Jillian, I see your hand is still raised. Did you have something to add? Or, and then Angela, I also see your hand is raised.
Oh, sorry. I forgot to turn it off.
No, it's okay. I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't missing something.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And Angela, did you want to share something?
Yeah, as a person who grew up as a ward of the state, and having no family connections, I think it's very important for me. It's always been very important to me to have another soul, another living being that was completely bonded with me. And I found that living with SI in my first attempt being at 11, when I was 24 and got my first companion animal, I realized that I couldn't go through with it because that dog relied on me. And once I was rooted, that was so significant, such a significant change for me.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that, and for sharing part of your story. Okay, so the effects, the symptoms are after the event and the experience. And it's just important to note the majority of the long-term effects that we have around trauma don't actually show up as PTSD. It can show up as a host of other things. And so then the effect of trauma is not what happened to you, but what happens inside of you. And so here is our almost 34-year-old mini horse, Clyde, and his buddy, Crackerjack, a donkey. What we know about Clyde's story is that humans were very unsafe for him. Because even though he's been with us now for 16 months, my husband is the only person that can consistently pet him and come up to him. But we promised him that as long as that he would be safe and loved exactly as he is, that we never had any expectation of him other than to just be his adorable, fluffy self, who you just want to pet because he's so fluffy. So how does this impact of trauma happen inside of us? Our bodies are really brilliantly designed with this built-in surveillance system that watches all the time for signs of safety and warnings of danger ahead. And it does that through this really fancy term called neuroception. And the thing to remember about neuroception is that it's always scanning for safety in 3 main areas. Both what's happening inside of us, that's a constant stream of information to our nervous system. And it's based on our heartbeat, our breath, what our organs are doing, what our muscles are doing outside of us and between us. So outside of us is that larger, bigger world. And then between us is what's going on between our individual interactions and then also in those bigger groups. this is a really big concept to wrap around, but it's the polyvagal theory. And I am going to move us through it quickly just for the sake of time. And we'll give you a couple of the key points to take away. But our nervous system, or the polyvagal system, is thinking about our system as being a ladder, that we're constantly moving up and down this ladder. When we're feeling safe and connected, we're at the very top in our ventral vagal system. But when we perceive danger, or we have a sense in our neuroception that there is something that we need to be aware of, we drop down into that fight or flight response. And if that fight or flight response can't get us away from the threat, then we drop down even further, and can collapse into, I can't cope, I'm collapsed, I'm shut down, feeling numb, just done. And so of note here is that our bodies are designed to process information all the time. It's a hierarchy. We're always moving up and down that hierarchy. That's normal. We're designed to do that. The key there, especially when it comes to trauma and how our body is responding to trauma and reminders of trauma, is just being able to identify where we are on that ladder. So thinking about that with animals in mind, when we feel connected, we feel organized, we feel like we can engage with the world. We're kind of like little monkeys that are just social and excited. But when we drop down into that sympathetic part of our nervous system, it's that system of action, it's fight or flight. It can feel kind of chaotic. It can feel anxious. It can feel angry. It can feel overwhelmed. But if it's too big, then or think about when you've had a really, really stressful day and then there's just been nothing that has alleviated the stress throughout the day. You get to a point in the day where you're just like, I am numb. I don't even know what's happening. I am just like shut down. I just want to numb out. Kind of like a little sloth, or it can happen kind of quickly, like a fainting goat. And so it just feels like there's no way out, or you're chronically fatigued. And so trauma disrupts our ability to feel like it's safe to be in connection. But feeling safe with other people is one of the single most important aspects of our mental health. And inherently, folks that have experienced trauma just chronically kind of feel out of sync with others. And so trauma really is not about it. It's about a loss of connection to ourselves, to our families, and to the world around us. Deb Dana is a really brilliant human being that has done a lot of really big work in our field around the polyvagal system and how important it is to honor that and pay attention to it. Just want to check in really quick because I see Wanda, you have your hand up. I just want to check in with you.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a quick comment. The person that was talking about suicidal ideation, I was in that same space, and I had dogs that saved my life. I would not be here without them. But anyway, I had to surrender them back in 2012. And it was something that I had an issue with the landlord, messy, illegal eviction. Swore I never would have another companion animal. And then in 2020, I got involved because literally everything shut down overnight. I'm on SSI, did a lot of volunteerism, suddenly couldn't do the volunteerism. And I was really suffering. And a cat came into my life, a stray cat came into my life. And I started doing trap, neuter, return in the alley behind our apartment. And I just wanted to make this statement. You're talking about Cracker Jack and Clyde. Animals do indeed. I truly, truly strongly believe that they do experience trauma.
Absolutely. And
they have the same kind of, they present in their own way, the way that we do. I mean, I made a connection with these cats with just because, I've done a lot of trauma training. I've done, anything that I could get my hands on, I will look at because it helps me understand what's going on in my head. But I have seen using the techniques that I've learned to work with people that are trauma impacted, it works with animals as well.
Absolutely.
And I just kind of wanted to show that intersection there that people probably outside of this conference don't really realize that.
Thank you for sharing that, Wanda, and thank you for sharing part of your story too, and how fundamentally important animals have been to your own story of healing and purpose. And I agree. Every animal that is in our sanctuary has experienced some level of trauma, abuse, neglect, grief. And what is incredible, and having rescues, like not just having animals present in our sanctuary was important to me, but specifically rescue animals. One, because my whole heart is just rescue animals. But two, because the clients that I work with see themselves in the animals. And what they see is not only are our animals safe, loved, and cared for, but they're accepted just as the way they are. Like we have no expectation of Clyde other than to just be himself. And if he never feels safe coming up to people, that's okay. Because what that teaches some of my clients is that it's okay to honor your boundaries, because that interaction in your nervous system has felt really unsafe. And as we have consistent and repeated interactions that are safe, when he first came to us, he would not come within 12 feet of people. Now he comes up and he will come in proximity, like within a couple of feet to new people. That's new for him. It's taken 16 months to get there, but he's there, and it's just the most humbling thing I've ever seen. And so very much like we humans here in the next few slides experience that trauma, they do too. And it just takes repeated, consistent, safe interactions to help rewire the nervous system, so to speak. And so what starts happening is that our nervous systems are designed to respond very quickly and immediately to threats. Like if we're out hiking and we see a bear, our system is designed to go, okay, got to release the stress hormones and get the body pumping and ready to go to get away from this. Like, is this a small enough bear that I can fight away? Do I need to run away? Or do I just need to play dead because I can't get out of this? But the problem is that it's adaptive and designed to be short term. But when we are in a chronically traumatizing situation, or there has not been the opportunity to address it within therapy, it can just, it kind of breaks the thermometer, so to speak. So when the stress response is activated too frequently, or if the stressor is too intense, the body can lose the ability to shut down those systems that are in play to help it respond to that stress. And so there's a disruption of that feedback, and essentially the body's thermostat is broken, and it keeps sending the primary stress hormone, which is cortisol, through the system. So what's happening in the brain, our brain develops from the bottom up. So this basic brainstem from the inside out. So the last part of our brain to develop is like the neocortex, which is really the thinking brain. So the important part to remember there is that our system, when we perceive a threat, the cortex, the thinking part of our brain, that allows us to have judgment and decision making, and it goes offline. It's like it loses the Wi-Fi signal. And so we get down into that limbic system. It's the seat of emotions. It's the monitor and judge of what's scary and pleasurable. The two important structures to remember here are the amygdala, which is the smoke detector. It's like it's always going off. It's kind of our alarm system, and the hippocampus. And the hippocampus does this thing where it takes new incoming information and relates it to past experiences. So it tries to see, does this match up? Is this safe? And if I have a template that's telling me that it's unsafe, then that's how I'm going to respond. It has a big role in our memory. Okay. So some of the cognitive, I'm just going to move through these kind of quickly because I am aware of time. Christina, I told you I could talk about this for 3 hours. So some of the cognitive effects that show up with trauma, disrupted sleep, because when our body is thinking that there's stress that we need to respond to, sleep is out the window. And so that can be either difficulty falling asleep or staying asleep, difficulty concentrating, because when that thinking part of the brain is offline, it's really hard to focus, which can show up as somebody being distractible, having ruminative thoughts, which is where thoughts are just kind of in a loop and kind of go around and around, having little to no motivation, having a self view that's really grounded and based in shame, and having a distorted worldview where often it feels like nobody can be trusted and the world is very unsafe because perhaps the world and the people in their world have been very unsafe. Some of the physiological effects, a chronically higher heart rate, more shallow breathing, globalized pain. I have a lot of clients that have chronic pain or autoimmune disorders, such as fibromyalgia, rheumatoid arthritis, there's another one that I'm forgetting. I have a few with Crohn's disease, but just those inflammatory diseases in our system, because when cortisol is kicking, it inflames the whole system. Chronic hyperarousal, which can show up as, again, that irritability, or just a very energetic little human. Gastrointestinal problems, because digestion is really impacted by the stress hormones in the systems, headaches, and then sensory malfunctions. One of my favorite quotes, sorrow which finds no vent in tears may soon make other organs weep. It just needs a vent to be able to be expressed. Otherwise, our body lets us know. Some of the behavioral effects that show up, that can be substance abuse, social isolation, recklessness, overworking, avoidance, suicidal gestures, because it can just feel so helpless or hopeless that can feel like the only relief from the intensity of what's going on. Appetite changes, and sometimes if someone is in relationship, that can look like infidelity or reckless behavior. Interpersonally, that can start to show up as married if somebody is married or partnered. That can show up as a relational distress. It can also show up as distress within just interpersonal friendships or colleague relationships. Social isolation, difficulty with communication issues, intimacy issues, disruption in attachment, family relationships, social relationships, colleague relationships. What we know to be true is that we can go through really big stressors, but social support is the single most important piece of that in terms of safeguarding against it. The thing is that we as humans don't do a great job of showing up in this. This study was done by my mentor, Dr. Joanne Cacciatore, but she was looking at what does support look like in grief support. And you can see here that in pets and animals, when we were talking about satisfaction of the type of support, pets and animals showed up as 78%. The highest group after that was an online grief group at 39% satisfaction. So we have a lot to learn from our animal friends in terms of how they show up and how they support. They teach us a lot of really important lessons. And so the role that companion animals have in healing, this is another one of my favorite quotes, to heal is to touch with love that which we have previously touched with fear. Love really is at the root of everything in terms of what animals afford us in the depths of trauma and traumatic grief. They lead with love. Love is the only way to grasp another human being in the innermost core of his personality. No one can become fully aware of the very essence of another human being unless he loves him. That's by Viktor Frankl, who survived the Holocaust. And that's my goat Cedar. He's the prince of my heart. Animals bridge the gap. Sometimes we need a bridge to close the gap from unsafe to safe when we are in connection with others. And they just have this incredible ability to stand in the gap and create a bridge leading back to feeling safe in connection with other humans. They allow the opportunity to feel safe enough to love, care for, and be present with animals, maybe the first step in taking a step towards relational connection with other humans. I have a 10-year-old client who, by the age of 4, had experienced every type of trauma that a human being can experience, including being trafficked for drugs by her biological parents. And she has a really hard time connecting with other humans and peers her age. And one of the things, she was just here volunteering over the weekend, and she said, Dr. Bree, the animals, they don't judge me. They're always happy to see me. They always say hi to me. I love taking care of them because I know it helps. Like, she was helping me clean out stalls. That is not a pretty job, but she was so excited and so happy to be doing it. But I think that that's true, and especially so within our companion animals, because they see us at our very worst when we are just in those really deep spaces that are so painful, and they greet us with unconditional positive regard, safety, and non-judgment. They're just non-judgmental. This is one of my precious beans, Bison, who really stood in the gap when my dad initially died. This is Clyde, and you see here, this is one of our volunteers here at the farm, also a human that has had really complex trauma in her life, and she and Clyde connected. And then just a couple of our goats really standing in the gap and hugging. And again, these are some of our volunteers, but most volunteers that are drawn here have experienced trauma in their own life. So in the presence of animals, they help to lower the levels of cortisol, which is that stress hormone that gets kicked in when we experience trauma. They help to decrease blood pressure, they decrease heart rate, they lower state anxiety, and they create this felt sense of safety and reciprocity, and helping us truly feel seen and heard by another person. From a neurobiological standpoint, just being in that safe connection, being safe, feeling seen, feeling heard, creates rewiring in our system that lets us start to show up in the world in a different way. We have these really fancy things in our brains called mirror neurons, which lets us register the inner experiences of other beings. So I think it was Donna that shared in the trap, neuter, release program, like that was helpful in terms of just being able to care for them in that way and having that cat to care for. And so being able to tend to another being lets us be in safe connection really is what it comes down to. And being in safe connection sends that message to our system that we're safe, and it allows our whole system to relax just a bit. Being able to symbolize our internal world lets the brain, the systems of the brain that might be offline as a result of trauma, link back together, which allows for integration, which then reduces our anxiety. And that amygdala, the smoke detector, being in the presence of animals allows greater access into that emotional center, which helps to increase self-understanding. And so from that fancy polyvagal perspective, the neuroception, it creates a neuroception of safety. Christine, I just want to check in because I just saw the time. Is it okay to go?
Yes. So the next thing we have scheduled is a break. So if people can stay on and don't mind cutting into their break, Dr. Bree, you're free to continue and folks can stay around.
Okay. In my previous life, I was an auctioneer, so I talk fast. So we're close to being at the end, but didn't want to miss the connections here. So when we see that animals are safe, we have 5 dogs, and when I am in the therapy office, this is my space, and my clients are here, they hear our dogs snoring, they see them sleeping, and they just naturally feel safer. But when we are with companion animals and we see them relaxed and at rest, it lets us feel a little bit more safe, and like we can take a little bit of a deeper breath, which lets us have a little bit less hypervigilance around what's going on in our environment. And it helps to increase that awareness of like what's happening in me, which then allows us to have greater regulation of all the things that are kicking around in our body as a result of stress. And it keeps coming back to that opportunity for connection, allows us to get into that top of the ladder space in our system of connection, which helps us to navigate the world a bit differently. So just raising awareness, the greater that we can raise that awareness, it helps to shift us out of that fight or flight state and increases that capacity to manage relationships. Bessel van der Kolk wrote The Body Keeps the Score. If you haven't read it, read it. It's an amazing book. This is a rainbow, the single best rainbow I've ever seen in my life, but that's the driveway of our farm, and that was last summer. So the bigger picture here is that we really need to have some community collaborations. I think it was Donna that shared that and I apologize if I have the human wrong, that some shelters have the opportunity for folks to bring their companion animals into the shelter, but then transitional housing might have tighter, stringent policies. So how can we work together as a community to really increase those collaborations so that we don't disrupt what's happening in the system and in the systems of healing, most importantly, and in the system of connection and attachment, to allow people to have the pets that help them tend to their trauma. Rachel, I see, are you off mute or did you just move in my screen? I think you just moved in my screen. So building strong community partnerships, because we just can't do this work alone. So for example, at the University of Tennessee, we have the veterinary social work program, which is an incredible program. But then we also have the CATE program, which is, it's both a shelter medicine program and a companion animal initiative and outreach. And so they do such incredible work, and to be able to describe their work would take a whole nother hour. But one of the components that they have is providing free of cost veterinary care to unhoused individuals, which is a unique program, but we need more programs like that. So community collaboration, again, bringing together like-minded individuals that are working to support and protect the relationship between companion animals and their humans. And just a couple of resources there. And Wolfie, my precious little baby blind dog, would like to know if you have any questions. And I'll stop my share so that way we can just see if anybody has any questions.
Oh, I wish you didn't stop your share. I love that picture.
No, I can still share. It's
No,
fine.
it's okay. No, I like that pillow. I need that pillow, except it says reserved for my cat. Um, well, thank you so much, Dr. Bree. I mean, that was like a flash course in trauma and the role of animals in healing from trauma. We are cutting into our break a little bit, but if folks want to stick around and ask some questions, there are some questions in the Whova Q&A, but Dr. Bree, I'm going to leave those to you to go back to and answer via Whova.
I can do that.
If one person wants to like maybe unmute themselves, raise their hand and unmute, we have time for one question. No? All right. I
appreciate you guys staying into your break. Thank you so much.
Well, I have one question for you. So your grief and bereavement work. So as someone who works, has great experience in grief and bereavement work, and someone who also works clinically with people and animals in that grief and bereavement work. When people experiencing homelessness have made that choice to unfortunately separate from their animals in order to access shelter and housing, I've heard them express feelings that are similar to grief.
Absolutely. Yep.
So that is my question. Would you say that that's accurate, that they are
Absolutely.
experiencing grief?
Yeah, it's the loss of a relationship, and probably one of the safest relationships that they have. Not only is it a safe relationship, but a lot of times it is the purpose and the reason to try and get to find some stability. So I lean in the direction of saying it's a deeper level of a relationship in that way specifically. It can be confusing, one, because not everybody recognizes the depth of grief that can be associated with the relationship with an animal, but two, because there's not an actual death. People will say, well, but they didn't die. And it's like, right, but it's the loss of a relationship to me, which is still grief.
Yes.
So,
well, I see that Jillian has a hand up. If you don't mind sticking around for one more.
Yeah, not at all. It's fine.
Okay. Jillian,
hello. Yeah, I don't know what's up with my, here we go. I always forget how to turn this thing on. Yeah, I belong to a grief group right now, and we talk about ambiguous loss and things of that matter. And one of the things that, new members coming in, they don't seem to understand that their thoughts and feelings are just as valid as anyone else, because grief is grief. It does, there's no specific way to grieve. There's no specific thing to grieve. You can lose your house, you grieve your home. You can lose a pet, you're grieving your pet. But my question to you is, how would you word a way of welcoming someone into like a grieving group to let them know that they are just as valid, besides saying you're valid?
That's a great question. Yeah, that's specifically the grief around the loss of the relationship with a pet. Is that your question, Jillian?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh man, because there's just something that clicks when you're present with clients, right? That all grief is valid, that when there's been the loss of a relationship, when there's love, grief is a reflection of love, and where there's deep love for another being, there's deep grief when they're no longer present in our life, whether it's because we had to surrender to a shelter because of homelessness, or because they've actually died, whatever the reason that they're no longer with us, creates a disruption in our nervous system, a disconnection, the loss of an attachment figure, and of a space that was safe. So I would say that you're here because thank you for being here. It's a tragic privilege. And I say it's tragic because I wish that people didn't need that space. I wish that we didn't have to talk about the things that we lose, that we love, so that it's a sacred honor to hold that space. And I'm grateful that they have found their way to us. to being able to hold space for their heart. I also run a grief group, and I don't question the type of loss as a valid reason. If you've had loss, you're welcome.
Well, thank you so much for that question, Jillian. Thank you so much for that answer, Dr. Bree. I am gonna give people a chance to take a moment. I'm actually feeling a little emotional after your answer, so I need a moment too as the moderator.
I appreciate it. Thank you.